So Kyle Loh, who used to be a prominent admin on Halopedia, put out some videos at Big Think a couple years ago, in which he talks about being a stem cell researcher at Harvard. In the video, Kyle Loh introduces embryonic stem cells. Kyle discusses the need for embryonic stem cells and how, because extracting an embryonic stem cell from a human embryo causes the destruction of the embryo, and all the ethical issues there, his team was working on developing a way to chemically turn other cells into embryonic stem cells.
If we can take any old cell lying around and we can make it into an embryonic stem cell, then we can basically make infinite amounts of human embryonic stem cells without ever touching a human embryo or harming a human life.
It all makes sense to me, which shows how much he must have dumbed it down, and it gets his point across very clearly. At least as far as I'm concerned. In the comments section, however, this guy Michael Roach posted the following. Not only religious people, but most followers of Aristotle, or other philosophical realists and some pragmatists, would argue that since the soul is the form of the body, animating principle, the destruction of one individual, although less developed, for the sake of another, more developed, is both a murder, the intentional killing of an innocent, and an act of cannibalism, the consumption of one individual of a species for the sustenance of another of the same species. This ethical burden deserves more attention than it got in your otherwise excellent presentation. I look forward to reading yours and others' comments. This completely misses Kyle's point. He was specifically trying to avoid getting into the ethical concerns of abortion, instead promoting a way to get embryonic stem cells without abortion even coming into it. I suspect Michael Roach watched the video looking for an ethics discussion and was so disappointed by Kyle's barely touching the subject that he didn't even bother to learn what the point of the video was supposed to be. That aside, I find Michael Roach's reasoning poor. I'm not very knowledgeable about Aristotle, so I can't comment on that directly, but I think ancient philosophers aren't good representatives of biology in comparison to modern-day biologists. While the ancient philosophers may have developed good ideas about insubstantial a priori concepts, anything scientific is sure to be obsolete. Modern-day science shows us things that the ancient philosophers never even had any clue about, such as the brain being the center of intelligence instead of the heart. I don't believe in a soul per se. There may be some metaphysical part of every human that represents their personhood, but there is no empirical evidence to suggest such. It is purely a faith-based concept. If we're talking about the soul in a metaphorical way, in that a soul is simply a word to indicate personhood and identity, I would agree with Heroes and say that the brain is the only part of the body that would be the soul or be host to it. The other parts of the body support the brain, support reproduction of genetic material, or serve no useful purpose. On the subject of abortion, I take the controversial stance I usually take and say that there's no personhood to embryos. They may be capable of developing personhood later, but in the fetal state there's nothing but an empty vessel. Even if there is personhood, I think that the woman has the right to abort given that it's her body subjected to the parasitism with all its negative effects. I won't get into that, but I'll make it clear that I am in favor of the woman's rights to choose whether or not to terminate pregnancy. Now it's the claim about cannibalism that baffles me. How is this cannibalism? There's no consumption, the cells aren't consumed. It's a part of a human body that is more or less implanted in another body to support the latter's life or life functions. Does Michael Roach think organ donations are cannibalized? Blood transfusions? Just by slapping the label of cannibalism on this, he thinks that it would automatically imbue it with immorality. I question that. Cannibalism brings to mind the image of savage island peoples in the South American region, generally exaggerated by the European settlers. I'm not sure what's real, but there are at least some peoples for whom the practice of cannibalism after military raids was an accepted cultural norm. This is often seen as horrific. What's really horrific is that people can war, often senselessly. I won't get into an anti-war rant here, but the point is that the murder is the bad part. What's done with the corpses afterward is largely irrelevant. Now, eating a dead enemy may often be done in a way to hurt the enemy's living family, but if there's some accepted cultural practice, or if the dead guy let it be known that he wants his body eaten or something, then cannibalism is not innately harmful. In the case of organ donation, it's entirely voluntary for the person from whose body the organs are taken. It's after their death, so no harm there. They're most likely not going to be killed by the government for use of their organs, and if a person can live longer because of this, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Is it cannibalism? No, in that there's no literal consumption. Even if you were to stretch the meaning of cannibalism to have voluntary organ donation count, though, it wouldn't be innately bad because cannibalism is not innately bad. And then we come back to the stem cells. Let's just skip over that whole abortion issue because Kyle wasn't even advocating that, and talk about what he was talking about. Take a non-embryonic stem cell and turn it into an embryonic stem cell is not bringing forth an embryo, but rather giving the cell qualities of a cell that might otherwise be found in embryos. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this does not even necessitate another human being donating such base cells, and that the same human with the injury could provide the cells from another organ. Even if that's not true, I don't think it matters ethically. Even if it's cannibalism, which it's not automatically immoral. So to sum up, Kyle rocks, and Michael Roach really missed the point. Harvesting stem cells is not cannibalism, and even if it were, it is yet to be explained how that is bad.